Okay, the whole title of this is Here's Why I Left. And I have been struggling, honestly, to talk about this because it's a lot, and looking back, I feel like I recognize that there was a lot that I could have done. Obviously, it happened, and in some ways I feel like it needed to happen in order for me to recognize that. So, it is hard for me to talk about, and I'm gonna try my best to stay focused and not get too emotional about it. I was pretty much overwhelmed with a lot of things. So, the last episode that posted was in April of this year, and it was right in the middle of season 5. And I was in partnership both as a separate brand and entity, but also as an employee with a past sponsor, and it was decided that relationship should close. And so it came out of left field. I was not prepared at all. I was actually in the process of rebuilding my safety net in terms of finances because I had been working for myself for like almost a year at that point when I decided to sign on back to working for somebody. And I only chose it because it seemed to be a mutually beneficial fit. And I had made that clear. And I did not want what I had built here to fall behind. And so looking back, there was a small window of opportunity for me to take on a little bit less work, but I threw myself into it because I was really excited about it. And I thought that by going at it full time, it would bring me a lot closer to everybody in the community and I could provide a lot more value if it had my full attention. So when that ended, there were a lot of things that was going on that I just wasn't prepared to have to shift and pivot for. So I spent January just grieving a bit, grieving a setup that I thought was really going to grow. It was going to help me grow in ways that I couldn't do it by myself. And so I feel like looking back now, the reason why that happened is because the way that I went into it was not the ideal setup that I needed. Again, I had a small window of opportunity to take a slightly different path, but that's okay because I feel like it ended because it was not truly the match that I needed. And that's okay. It still rattled me to a point that I felt I felt like, is what I'm doing actually worth it? And I threw myself back into the show and did a lot of great recordings with people, did a lot of cool stuff. And the season started and it was going and it was chugging along. And then I got to April, where a friend of mine, a really close friend of mine, who also was a past guest on the show, um, she was getting married. And I had the honor and privilege to be a bridesmaid. And it was in Hawaii, right? It's Hawaii. So my partner and I decided to make the weekend for the wedding a full week-long vacation as well. It was a great time, but things started creeping up on me while we were there that I did not realize was happening. We get back from Hawaii, and it was like my entire financial setup just completely crashed. And I was about this close. I was about super, super close to not saying anything to anybody, to completely suffering in silence, and to potentially, honestly, lose everything. That's the part that when I look back, I'm like, I coulda lost a lot had I not said something. I had almost paid my car off. I had been doing really well about adjusting my finances to make sure I was taken care of at least 2 months ahead. That was completely burnt through, and I found myself crying to my partner, freaking out because I'm like, "I don't know how I'm gonna pay my bills next month. How did I get here?" I had paid sponsorships, I had a full-time job at one point. I'm like, "How did my setup get me to this point where I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills next month?" And so it just tipped me off into kind of a spiral of things because I had to start cutting things out. I had to start thinking through how much of my business can I keep afloat? What do I have to let go? All of that. And so I fell into a really rough depression. And that last episode that aired in April for season 5 was it posted while we were in Hawaii, but ever since then, I just could not get myself back on track. And I found myself I started to hate this. I started to hate the planning. I started to hate having to figure out what guests I was gonna have. I started to hate even my messaging. I just did not find any joy or love or hope in what I had. And so I just crumbled. And it started out with, okay, I'll just skip a recording this day. If I'm not fully in it, if I don't have the energy, if I don't really want to do it, should I present myself when I know that I feel that way? Especially because I was still recording video. So I didn't want anybody to look at the video version of the episode and be like, she doesn't look like she's into it. You can just tell sometimes. Some people are really great actors, but sometimes you can tell, man, there's just no life there. So I was truly of the mindset that if I'm not in the mood to do it, that I shouldn't. My tune's a little bit different now about that just because there are some moments where pushing through actually energizes me, and it's just me overcoming the battles in my head about it. But at the time, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So I'm like, I'm not feeling good. Don't want to put that energy out there. We'll try it the next day. And that excuse just became same thing the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. And then I just stopped communicating with anybody. People in the diabetes community, mentors, people that have always really supported me. I just stopped communicating. And I had gotten to a point where my days looked like waking up, scrolling through my phone, and literally staying in bed all day. And I had stopped taking all my medication. I wasn't wearing a CGM anymore. I wasn't checking even with my manual meter. I just stopped. And it was it's a little scary to think about now of I don't know where I was at during those periods at all. I don't know if I was actually in range or if I was off the charts. I don't know anything. I had doctor's appointments that I either canceled or no-showed to, and I just could not bring myself to just leave the house. My poor dogs, even that was a struggle. Like, even just taking them out was a struggle. I live on the 3rd floor of an apartment, y'all, so I hate stairs, and it's just tough when you have 2 dogs and one that's particularly very active, and she wants to dang near pull you down the stairs and drag you everywhere, and she prefers to be off leash, but we're an apartment complex, so letting her run off leash is a big no-no. So, I was just struggling, y'all. I was so tired, and I was frustrated and sad because I could not figure out why I didn't wanna do this anymore. I just didn't wanna do it anymore.